Welcome to the Audio Description Network Alliance. I'm Roy Samuelson. Today we have a very special guest, Briana Leone. She is a voice talent and a voice actor and an audio description narrator. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Roy. Thanks for having me.
Great. I'm so glad. Let's jump right in. What do you love about audio description?
I love reading out loud, something I loved to do as a kid and had no idea it would be something that I would translate into my adult career. I love being, I feel like everyone's probably said this before, but I love being able to bring movies and TV shows to a community that otherwise hasn't been able to enjoy, movies and TVs like we have.
And it's neat to hear you say about reading out loud that this has been a part of your life since, how long, as long as you can remember, like when you were a kid?
I learned to read, apparently. I don't even remember this, but apparently I was reading like novels, even though I didn't even know what I was reading when I was like 5. So I remember I always raising my hand in class when we had to read out loud. And I think there's definitely a balance of, you don't want to be too animated, but you still want to have some like intrigue in your voice, especially as like I got older. You want to like still be kind of cool. And I think that's kind of, like cool and laid back. And I think that's kind of translated into voiceovers and audio description.
That's great. And we talk a lot about balance. Maybe we could even talk a little bit about your experience as a voice talent outside of audio description and inside audio description as far as that balance goes. That there's been so many conversations about how it's a high wire act. And I love talking about the high wire act of audio description, that it's like, it's not less of a performance. It's just a really nuanced, special thing. Do you agree with that? Maybe you got a different take on that?
Oh, yeah. I think it's definitely a balancing act. That's a great way to describe it, because one of the things that was hard for me, or I remember when I went on my first audition for this, they were just like, read out loud and be even keeled. And I was like, okay. And part of me is just like, wow, I sound really monotone. Like, is this what they're looking for? It's really hard for me to not want to add my own inferences or my own insight into it, like emphasizing certain words, being like, oh, well, this is what you would be saying. But really, you want to be objective. You don't want to be influencing the audience in a way that they might not have interpreted that way. And that was difficult for me at first. I mean, it was difficult internally because that never really came across. But I remember when I would be finished recording, I'd be like, did I do a good job? Like, was this what they wanted? Like, I didn't really get much feedback from the directors, but that was like a good thing, I guess, they're just like, yep, no, this was great. And I'm really glad to have been able to just keep that integrity, of what was written for me, and just not go too crazy. Cause we're animated, we do characters. I just finished like an animated show and like I'm this crazy character, so like switching gears is just, you just need to remember that like this is a different medium and you don't insert too much of yourself into this because it's not about you.
When you think about the recording from home versus recording in studio, advantages, disadvantages?
Definitely a lot of advantages. I am able to do a lot more projects, I feel. I think that's the biggest advantage. I think disadvantages is I don't get to watch the videos anymore, at least for the companies that I work for. I don't know if it's a security thing, but I am really just coming in on beeps, kind of like dubbing. Sometimes when it's really busy, I don't even hear any audio. I just come in at beeps. And I think that's a bit of a disadvantage because when I can see what's going on, I can understand sometimes like what I am saying. And sometimes when I'm just reading it and not having any visual cues, I can stumble a bit more.
And it sounds like that possibly could affect your performance. Do you get production audio? Can you hear what's happening? Does that influence you?
Yeah, I get that sometimes, but when I'm doing remote, they jump from cue to cue. So it's different. Whereas when I'm in the studio, I get to, watch the entire episode, watch the entire movie. It takes a bit longer though. I think maybe because, we do edits right away afterwards. Whereas when I'm remote, I record. It usually takes a lot shorter time for me. And then we take a break and the directors or the describers, they rewatch it. They watch it down and then come back with any pickups. And sometimes there are, and sometimes there aren't.
Gotcha. And in that context, a describer is the writer, maybe the director that's guiding you through the recording?
Yes, I believe actually it might just be the director. And
oh, very cool.
The describers write it and someone else directs it or produces.
Gotcha.
I'm terrible with the terminology.
There's a lot of roles, right? It
Yeah.
sounds like your contribution is the reading of the script and interpreting the script based on what you've got. And it sounds like they're, especially with remote, that you're really trusting in the director of the audio description in this sense to make sure that the context is clear. For example, if something's happening on screen that might be sarcastic versus true in the sense of something, I don't know, I'm making that up, but it's like there's a lot of different interpretations that you could bring to these scripts. And it sounds like you really do trust in the team that's built the script to be able to guide you through that.
You have to, definitely.
Do you see that a blind professional narrator would be able to do this work, particularly since remote, you're able to deliver without seeing the video?
That is a great question. I actually was thinking about that earlier today. I am a big proponent of people who are within the community also being a part of making the art and being a part of it, of the behind the scenes too. I mean, they're the best people to know what they want and what they need.
Exactly. And that context can really influence the recording, right?
And the writing. Yeah, they definitely bring that level of I am the consumer. What my input is extremely valuable and we should be hearing them. And that's why I'm really grateful that you've invited me to certain Facebook groups where we can hear directly from the visually impaired community and hear what they're looking for and hear what their challenges are. That was something that was new for me that I felt I needed to hear and be involved with more. What does the community want to hear? Because ultimately we work for them and we want to know what they have to say.
In that context of the being involved, that connection that you have with our audiences who are blind or low vision, can you talk a little bit about maybe a specific influence, maybe some way that you've done your reads a little bit differently based on what you've learned?
You know, I haven't. I think that that definitely would be the next step. And that was something I wanted to talk about was I would love to hear feedback. You know, I think I don't really get much feedback on what I'm doing, and I don't know if other narrators do, but I would love to know. And I think that would also feed into my, am I not giving enough? Am I giving too much? I do a lot of the dramas and like horror and varies and action movies. I don't know if it's because I can talk really fast but clearly, but sometimes I don't really do comedies. And I don't know if it's because my voice is just naturally like grittier or lower, or I'm very serious sounding. But I would love to know, like, what are you looking for in a comedy? What are you looking for in a romance? What are you looking for in an action, in a thriller? I think all these genres need to have some very subtle nuances into how you emote, into how you do your narration. So definitely would love to hear more about feedback, but I think that kind of leads into another challenge I have is I very rarely get to say my name that I'm like I narrated by, and I feel like maybe it's just I've never really directly asked. When it's been written down in theatricals, that's great, and also a broadcast show that I work in, that is great, but I don't know if I'm just scared to ask or if that's something I should, but usually it's just like audio description created by and then this company, and I don't know, I wonder how many people know that I am the person who did this, and I feel like that's why having an ADNA profile would be very helpful.
As you've been talking about the feedback, that our audiences do want to be immersed in the story in the same way that sighted audiences are immersed, that there's no obstacle. We've talked about being on the freeway of communication and there's no speed bumps to get in the way, that experience of being able to just watch and focus on, in your examples, the horror. If something scary is happening, that they're jumping at the same time as everybody else and that your voice is carrying that in a way that doesn't interrupt. And I can only assume because you've been doing this for a long time, let's say, right? That you've
2015.
you've got those many years of experience. Right now, we're recording this in 2021. So we've got 6 years of context of doing this, and you keep on getting hired. That is its own kind of feedback. But what I'm also hearing is that audience feedback does mean a lot. And it's a fair question. Like, how can you get feedback if they don't know that it's you?
Exactly. Yeah.
Where would you love to see audio description headed? I think we can interpret a lot of subtext just from what we've talked about
Mhm.
so far, but is there something maybe specific that we haven't covered, or maybe a little more detail about something we have covered of where you'd love to see audio description headed?
I think one of the common denominators I'm seeing in some of these groups that I've been invited to be really just a listener and hear back community feedback is audio description is not consistently accessible. Sometimes people get to the same show through different entry points. For example, you have Hulu, but you have Showtime on Hulu. You have FX for Hulu. You pay these add-ons. And I'm seeing that some people are not able to access shows that I'm aware of that there is description. And what I'm seeing in the comments are people saying like, oh, it's because it's this platform. It's whatever the distribution network is, or it's because you're on your desktop and you're not on an app, or vice versa. I think that's really detrimental, because we don't all have the same access points. We get to the same show through different means. And what I would like to see audio description, or the direction to move into, is that the community can access the same description however they get into it.
Thinking about all the elements that we've talked about, from the writing to the casting, the directing, your contribution as a voice talent to the sound editing, the sound mixing, and then sending it somewhere, and then for an audience member or even you to be able to turn it on, that any one of those things, if there's the weakest link to that, it makes the whole thing not work, whether it's access or whether it's a terrible performance by a voice talent or terrible writing, that any one of these things can really hurt the others.
Yep. I think that's just filmmaking in general. It's all a big team effort. And we're only as strong as our weakest link. All those cliches. But it's true. It's true.
Yes. Can people follow you on social media or a website or something?
Yeah, absolutely. My Instagram is at Briana Leones. That's at BrianaLeoness. And that's pretty much the only social media I'm the most active on.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Briana.
Thank you, Roy. It was wonderful to talk to you.